of Education. This meeting has been properly notified, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I don't believe we have any visitors or delegations who would like to address the board, so we will move right into informational items, and the first one is fun. We have a Wildcat Pride Award.
All right. This one's going to Nate Johnston.
Yeah.
Nate, nice to meet you. Full respect. So the school board commends you for your incredible dedication as a volunteer at Greenwood over the past 3 years. Each Wednesday, you have generously given your time to support a student, and that commitment has made a meaningful difference. Your kindness, helpfulness, and selfishness shine through in everything you do. You took the initiative to offer your time and support, demonstrating remarkable character. Your consistent dedication and positive relationship you have built are truly commendable. We are proud to recognize and honor your generous time and care you have given to support a student in our school community. Nate, you are a true ambassador of Wildcat Pride. Thank you very much.
Picture? Nate, thank you very much.
Did you get one?
Did you get a good picture?
Yeah. That's what I do.
Just a photographer.
Nate, in addition to all of the things that Bo read on your award, it also strikes me of how important it is for our young children to see a big kid taking an interest in them and being a role model and just somebody who cares. So thank you very, very much. And Terry, you must be really proud of your son. I am. So we didn't quite realize that when we got you that we also had a wonderful volunteer. So thank you. Thank you for all that you do. All right, and we'll move on to a spotlight on education and the Peace Initiative that you have at Montessori.
Hi, everybody. I'm Claire Rogers. I'm a principal at RFPME. This will be really short. It's a very long presentation, and I'm going to just highlight a few things for you. This is just our way of doing character education at Montessori. It's just a little bit different. Peace education was embedded in the beginnings of Montessori back in 1907 and has continued throughout Montessori's work and actually was very, very important and central. So we've kind of taken a different twist a little bit, and I just wanted to kind of highlight a few things that we do, show you the comprehensive. It's very comprehensive, very broad, but I promise you I won't keep you for an hour to do all of that. I know you're busy tonight, so.
Is it turned on? On the side.
Other side. There we go. Awesome. So Montessori, her career really in Montessori education happened during World War I and World War II. So really she saw the effects, the adverse effects of war on children. So even though she started her method of education based on scientific observation of children, it quickly became broader and more whole child centered just because of what she was seeing, and not only the effects of family situations, but also the effects of not having food, not having resources. World War II, World War II. She spoke about this at the National Congress of Montessori in 1937. She was in Paris. She wrote a book, Education and Peace. She was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 4 times in her lifetime. So this was central. So our story, we've been kind of finding our identity when it comes to peace education and character education. There's lots of prongs of this. So the first one really is peace within oneself, and we have lots of ways that we do that. I'm not going to go through all the nitty-gritty details here, but really spending a lot of time really helping children center and relax and be at peace with themselves and feel comfortable in their own skin is paramount to learning. Connecting with nature in the classroom. These are some of our murals in the hallways that we've had sports for. Can't remember the names at this moment, but also peace within our classroom communities, and this is where I want to highlight a few things. We have a peace path that is actually a beautiful, huge quilt where it has footprints of children, and if two children have a conflict, they can roll out their peace path, and they actually have prompts on the path to conflict resolution, and they do it independently. Of course, the teacher kind of walks them through that the first couple of times, but then if there's a conflict between children, they can just grab that peace path and walk out into the hallway and have their moment to hear each other's side of the story of what happened and how to find resolution.
Wow.
It's really cool.
I could use one of those next Christmas.
They also all have a class compact that they work with our counselor, but more importantly, I want to talk about our class council, because this is another way that we just really build community. If a child has a problem with anything, like somebody left the pencil sharpenings on the ground instead of cleaning them up, or someone's not playing fair at kickball, or somebody's making a mess and not hanging up their coats in the hallway and I trip over them, or somebody's not emptying their water, whatever it is, right? They can write it in their class council book, and once a week, the leader of the class, it's completely student-led, will read out whatever the beef was. And the children get a chance to decide, and they have a talking piece, whether this is just a friendly reminder to the group or whether this is going to be a discussion. And if it becomes a discussion, they're going to come up with a solution that the teacher may or may not think is great. I mean, of course, she's going to keep children safe. But at the end of the day, then the children run with that, and that's part of their class constitution and their class compact. And so it really gives children a way of feeling accountable to one another that doesn't involve adults. So that's a huge piece of what we do, which goes into restorative circles and all the rest of it. Another part is that we embed our guidance lessons. Karen Swanson is fantastic at this, where she actually will spend 2 hours in a classroom and have a mini lesson to explain a topic based on what that classroom needs at that time, and then do mini lessons with small groups and pull out. And so that, which is kind of more of the Montessori way. So she knows every student, she knew every student and felt like she had to check in within the first 2 weeks of school. You know, so she really has that temperature on all of the children, and children feel a lot more comfortable sharing with her in a small group setting than they would in a full class. There's our classroom there's a couple of examples of our classroom contracts, and here's the example of one of our books that they use for their class council meetings. Also, we do a lot of things within our school. The books are really funny if you ever need a good, some levity. A lot of things within our school. We have our homeschool compact. We do a lot of assemblies and things that, gather the group together. Our 6th graders spend a lot of time together doing a whole bunch of things, and it also includes an overnight trip to the Environmental Learning Center in Waynesboro. We have a No Place for Hate team, which is a part of the, let's see if I can find it. There it is, from the Anti-Defamation League. We're one of 3 schools in Wisconsin to have a team. And they're kind of student directed, and they kind of lead our students through, peacemakers at assemblies. They research different things about how to create peace. One of the biggest things that they did is they raised money to get ourselves a peace pole. So we are one of 250,000 peace poles around the world, and we're actually on a map. So and it represents the 8 languages spoken at our school. So, and there they are. Also, just peace within our community. So really getting outside of our doors and having people in. So having guest speakers present on all sorts of different topics. Parent education so that they understand Montessori. Partnering with local businesses and the university, all of those great things. But the one I wanted to highlight was our Child as a Guide night, which allows our children to be the teacher, and parents come in, and it happens right before conferences, and it is almost 100% attended. It's quite remarkable. And children go around their classrooms and teach their parents, and their parents become the children, and they give the lessons of the things that they've been learning, so that parents have a real beautiful window in to understanding what they're doing at school, which is a great kind of springboard for conferences the next week. Yeah, so there's our 6th graders. They have been glass blowing this year. They went to Mimi's, and that was really fun because they actually baked cookies for the assisted living facility as part of that grant that came. And they also went to Lost Creek Ranch and took care of the rescue horses and learned how to ride. This is the Child as a Guide night. You can see children actually teaching their parents how to do things. Also, that's one of our parents of one of our teachers who is a vet who always comes in on Veterans Day. And yeah, then we kind of end with Peace in Our World. And you know, we do a lot with, our curriculum is very, very integrated into culture and history. In the past, our kids have gone to the MMUN, which is it's mock United Nations in New York City. They have pen pals in Asia. So there's just been a lot to help them understand that the world is actually a small place, and that there's a lot of ties that bind us. So there's the Peace Pole installation a few years ago, and the team that made that happen. Any questions? It's really fast, and I'm not going to go into the systems and staffing and all the things that we do, because that would be like a whole other 20 minutes. So, but just know we're working hard to really give children those foundations of character and just accountability and strength that they need as they leave our community.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So is this what's happening at Montessori for character education, and what's happening at Westside is different? It's around more of the characters or the...
Yeah,
Right.
so ours, we are peace, problem solvers, engaged, accountable, cooperative, empathetic. We also have the Virtues Project that we also use and kind of tie in. Our counselor also uses Character Strong, which is kind of embedded in our, and we also do have like the character posters and things as well. So it's all kind of cross-referenced and kind of webby. We just kind of try to make it so that it relates better to the way that we kind of run things, the curriculum that we use, the language that we use. And we found kind of that blend works pretty well for us. That helps.
Yeah, thanks.
But the children are learning the character traits,
Oh, yeah.
so then when they get to Meyer Middle School, they're familiar
They're not,
with.
right, it's
that.
not foreign. That's great.
All
And
right.
is there any, I mean, this is Montessori, is there any thought on weaving this into the other elementary schools? About, focusing on peace, or?
It's a good question. I kind of feel like everybody has their things that they're strong at, right? And that they're doing. And
This is
so
different.
I feel like this is just what we're good at. Right?
Yeah.
And it's just a little bit different. They have things that are very, very parallel with the councils and a lot of assemblies and that sort of thing as well. So it's really not that different. It just looks
Just
a little bit
different, it sounds a little different,
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like we use our language and we have all of our things, and then we kind of bridge that into kind of character traits and the rest of it, so that by the time they go to middle school, they've got it all.
Nice, that's good stuff.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much,
Kay.
Kay, for being here and for your work.
Thanks.
All right, we are going to move into reports. We have administrative reports first, and we have WIG updates, and Mr. Chapin.
All right, good evening, everyone. Maybe just to add to your question about character education at Montessori, I think one of the things that's pretty unique about how we do character education in our district is we use what's called the Learning Principles Framework, which is not a canned curriculum. And so if you look at what Westside does, you have their character traits, and they also have their, remember I call them you have your different values as well.
Yeah, the virtues.
Virtues.
Yeah.
And so we have, they're doing what works for them, Westside does what works for them, but within a framework, the 11 principles framework,
Yeah.
so, yeah, you should really probably go with you guys are doing, so.
Yeah.
Well done. All right,
Thank you.
here we go. Just a refresher of our goal, 100% of my middle school students will be achieving the target standard. And I put a 3 in parentheses because with our standard-based scoring and grading, a 3 is achieving the target standard. 90% of the standards measured by their unit assessments. So we're giving comments on the assessments from their core teachers, and that's what they're basing that score on. This is a lofty goal. This is a high bar, and I'll share some perspective on this when we look at, I'll just share a slide about the board exam results. And not only that, but we're actually measuring every standard and how every student is doing against that standard in our core classes. So we're tracking every kid in our building for all of our core classes. So we have a goal of 100% of our students achieving the target standard, as I mentioned, on 90% of the standards. This is just what it looks like, a little bit comparing apples to oranges. But on the Ford exam, this is for mathematics, and it goes all the way back to 2015, and comparing how we did compared to schools in our area versus the state. So this is for mathematics, and it ranges anywhere from 67.3% up to 73% in the past Ford exam. So for kids, if you're in the 70% range, you're doing pretty solid. ELA, just kind of some context here, how kids do it in my middle school compared to other schools in our area and at the state level. And again, this is students scoring proficient advanced, and this one's for ELA. On this slide, I want to focus on the data protocol, so if I can have Amanda open that up, and I'm happy to ask you to scroll a little bit. So what each of our core teachers are doing after a summative assessment, if you click on the sun, earth, and moon, so you can see the standard at the top there. Science in particular, we have other standards for other subject areas. They're very in-depth. There's multiple learning targets that go with those. And so first thing we do is go visual, so taking it from a spreadsheet, and we're tracking, okay, how many kids got a 1 versus a 4 and everything in between. And it's not about comparing one teacher against the other teacher. It's learning from each other, and that's really part of the PLC process. If you scroll down a little bit more, Amanda, and then they take the time to observe and analyze. And then the last part that we ask them to do, if you scroll just a little bit further, is to infer and act. So what do you want to keep doing based on the results? What do we want to start doing? And then what do we want to stop doing? So this is a typical, our teachers meet every Thursday through our PLC process, and this takes place after a common summative assessment.
And are the scores objective or subjective? Is the teacher?
It's based on standards. It's based on then proficiency scale. I'll show you a proficiency scale.
It's pretty
How they come up
objective.
with that. And then I'll show you the scale here in a minute. That's a good question. You can go back to the slide presentation. All right, so our commitments to our lead measures include our belief that all students can learn at high levels. It's those weekly PLC meetings that I mentioned. It's following a common data protocol. It's following a common assessment calendar. And this will be even more important as we go on to next year and look at common formative assessments, because we need to tighten that window up and how we respond to that data. And then it's the use of response days as well. I shared this last fall. Not every assessment you need to do a certain response, but based on how our kids are scoring, the teacher will determine, do I need to do a whole group, do I need to do a small group, or can I just simply move on? All right, so we'll take a look at our results. We had 6 out of the 70 standards up to this point of the school year, where 100% of students achieved the standard score. I also took the time to break this down. We do have half steps, and the half steps are important, and I'll show you why they're important in just a second. But we had 45 out of the 70 standards where 90% or greater of our students nearly achieved the target standard. For us, it's a 2.5. Our scale, and this is tough to read, hopefully you have it up in front of you. Our goal is for every kid to hit a 3. All right, that's the target content. We purposely put half steps in because I believe the half steps give kids a little bit of hope that they're almost there. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a second, because there are so many learning targets for one standard. We do offer opportunities for students to extend as well. This is just one, this is a proficiency scale. This is for sixth grade ELA. If you really want to dive deep, that sixth grade ELA Guaranteed Viable Curriculum is an impressive document. Our teachers have worked really hard over the last 3 to 5 years putting that together. There's resources and assessments, and it's pretty cool to look at. You'll notice that for one, this is just for one standard. There's 3 parts to the writing, and then there's multiple learning targets. So what do we do when a kid is demonstrating 3 out of those 5 learning targets? Well, they have an opportunity to earn a 2.5, right? If they hit all of those and they're consistently doing that, they're probably going to hit a 3. So those half steps are important. Science, this one, again, science is a subject area where the content, the standards are really quite in depth. And so again, this is actually breaking down the moon phases, ellipses, and seasons. And there's multiple learning targets for each of those, and the kid has to be able to demonstrate all of those in order to get a 3. So it's very detailed. This is what it looks like by subject area.
So Mark, could you just talk about the 1 out of 13, 0 out of 9? When I
So out of the
wasn't
13 standards,
quite sure.
out of the 13 standards, there was only one of those standards where 100% of the students hit a 3. So again, if you look at the state when you look at the Ford exam, if you hit 72%, you're doing pretty darn good. So out of the 13 standards, 10 of those standards, there's 90% greater if students hit a 2.5.
And is that calibrated for this time in the year of meeting those standards?
Yep.
Or would this be for by the end of the year? This is for where we're supposed to be now?
So some standards are year-round, some are standalone standards that are one and done.
Okay.
Yep. It kind of depends on the subject. Writing typically has more standards that go throughout. Math is typically more standalone. Science typically more standalone. Social studies, there's some cause and effect that goes into it.
So you'll do a report at the end of the year where we'll see the progress that's made towards the standards here and the goal. The idea would be a lot of the 2.5s hopefully would move to 3.
Yep.
And if we didn't achieve our lofty goal, where all of our 3s were at 90%, we would be able to hopefully look at the combined and see that we're approaching in the areas that we're not there. Is that a safe assumption?
Yep. Yep. I mean, we can break this down in a bunch of different ways. To get 100% of your kids meeting proficiency on a standard is very difficult.
Yeah, this is hard. Not easy.
Yeah, like I said, I think this is a very lofty goal. I think the bar is high. I think the way that we're looking at student learning versus a letter grade is a lot more rigorous than the way I've done in the past.
That's good.
Adjustments, those PLC notebooks, we're going to continue with those. Common formative assessments are being created this year, will be implemented next year. That's why those testing windows need to be pretty close. They can have timely conversations on how to respond to that information. That's already happening, but to do common formatives gets a little bit more detailed. And then the other thing that's been really interesting is discussions around what we call integrated reliability. How you scored versus how I scored can sometimes look different. So sitting down and scoring each other's work, we're seeing that take place and trying to get more consistency on how we're scoring. Cass Watson, our instructional coach, was not able to make it, but she did put a couple notes on here. So talking about measuring growth in systems. So the shift is that the data protocol cycle has guided our data conversations and is informing our decision making. We talked about the visualize, the observe and analyze, and then infer and act. I mentioned the calibration, how important that is, that teams discovered that proficient Room 101 doesn't necessarily mean the same thing in Room 105, so calibrating is really important. And the teams are adjusting instructional strategies for the following year based on where the students are actually struggling this year, so making those notes in those PLC notebooks. And the last part here, the summary. The WIG goal, provider of the destination, the process has been the most beneficial. We're more data informed, more consistent, more collaborative. And we talked about next year, making sure that we continue with those data protocols for common formative assessments, and how that's going to impact our instruction.
It's a lot of work.
It's been a lot of work. Yeah. I've shared this with people. I've been through a lot of change processes. going from traditional grading to standards-based grading has probably been one of the hardest shifts we've all grew up.
Yeah,
It's
very hard.
ABC, it has been around for 100 years, and so to make that shift and then to do it well, and we took us 3 years to get to this point.
And if you
We're
back
not
up,
perfect yet by any means, but we're getting pretty dialed in, I think.
yeah, if you back up to what's the number one reason we're doing this, and are other districts across the state doing it?
Number one reason for doing this is accuracy in grading, and I think the other one is to give kids hope.
Yep.
That, you know, I love, there's a poster in one of our teachers' room that says not yet, right? We're not quite yet there.
Yeah,
But accuracy, grade inflation, if you do look at the research, grade inflation,
yeah.
high school grade inflation compared to ACT, is an interesting study. When we first introduced this before you got on the board, we found out that, this is just one example, we have 2 teachers. This teacher gave 90% A's and B's, but only 43% of their kids were proficient in advanced on the 4 exam. This person has 60% A's and B's, and they're 63% proficient in advanced on the 4 exam. So there's a disconnect with
Yeah.
grading that we're
Right.
trying to get it as accurate as possible, as
Mhm.
much as we possibly can.
Yeah, and is it becoming the norm across the state, or?
It kind of depends, like Osceola's been the model, Osceola's been one of the top schools, Amory's been one of the top schools in the area. Osceola's been a model for us to follow,
Great.
the standards-based grading. Depends, I know some people just, it's a lot of work, you know.
A lot of work.
Eau Claire's just, I think about Big Eau Claire is, just had a conversation this fall with the middle school principal, and they're just starting to go to standards-based grading now, but I think it's a trend that's been happening. for a
Yeah.
while, so.
Good.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank you.
Mara.
Great work.
All right, River Falls High School.
Good evening, Kit Litkey, building principal, thanks for having us. Mark, that's just awesome to be very transparent with your data, I appreciate that. We're gonna try to do the same. We too have our literacy goal in place that we're trying to, again, have all of our students sustain mastery of reading comprehension or at least achieve 10% growth each year. This is, again, year 2 for us. We are learning definitely by doing. I think you'll see with our data points itself, we take 2 steps forward and maybe a step back at times. We're going to be very transparent with our data, and then we're going to talk about what our next steps are and what we're learning from that data itself. So I'm just going to turn it over to Heidi and Lisa. Mike Birnbaum, our 9th grade English teacher, is also here to kind of share some clear examples, but I think Lisa will start first.
So if you remember, we started a year and a half ago with building SLO, which is our WIG, that by 2027 all students ever from high school will achieve and sustain mastery of reading comprehension or will achieve at least 10% growth each year. Reading mastery being defined by scoring 24 to 27 on the pre-ACT or the ACT assessments. What we did last school year, the 24-25 school year, is we focused on providing professional development in literacy strategies to our teachers so that they really understood how to utilize those strategies in their classrooms and help students be better readers for their content. Each content area also created WIG assessments last year to be able to gauge how students were doing in literacy in their courses. This year, it moved into a focus on content literacy, specific for each content. They researched in their PLCs what kind of literacy were they going to focus on in English, in social studies, etc., and how would they embed that into their content areas. Still doing assessments so they can kind of gauge how students are doing in their classes, but then this year we also added building-wide assessments. We did one in the fall, so all 9th graders took the same assessment. All 10th graders took the same assessment, and all 11th graders. We did one in winter, and then our third one will be the pre-ACT and the ACT for that data. And so we'll be able to have some really solid data points to compare, where we're comparing an assessment that everybody took, all the same assessment taken by each grade. So what do we do with that data is we utilize that for administrative decisions and teacher instruction. In the past few years, we've had 2 literacy elective sections, one offered term 1 and one offered term 4, filled by different sets of data, recommendations from teachers, grades, etc. We are going to move, this coming year, coming up, we will have 4 literacy elective courses that focuses on building skills for those students that are struggling in literacy. We'll be able to offer 1 per term instead of 1 at the beginning and end of the year. And so those are the areas that, but that's kind of the data that brings us to where we are.
Okay, so last year, Mr. Haskins came with us and he showed you an example of a building team and the kind of common formative that they had created for their department teams to use in biology. So I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was just a brief article that they had and then the 10 questions. And so then that common formative piece, they're able to use that. That has continued into this year. Teams have adapted that. They've, again, focused on those foundational literacy strategies. But this year, now we have the common summative assessment, or we have the building-wide assessment. And so Amanda's passing around an example of the science test that we now have this year, where each one of you should have a copy of that. And so then you're able to see on that what the level of reading is. So kind of for the refresher of how, what the rigor was last year. Now you'll see in the one for this year, it actually has charts and graphs that are incorporated, because for content literacy, the science team had said that was one area that the science team needed to kind of bolster for content literacy. And so when you're able to look at that specific example there, looking at the level of vocabulary that's there, right? And so understanding and thinking back to those specific universal literacy strategies that we talked about. But now this is an example of the one that was just given this winter to our 11th graders. Okay, so 11th graders throughout the whole building leading up to the ACT. This was one of the 2 articles, because every student on the building-wide WIG gets 2 separate articles and a total of 10 questions that are at that ACT caliber for the questions that are there. So just wanted to give that as a point of reference for you for the types of articles now that are being given across the whole building, and then knowing that at each grade level, within the content, they're kind of building and scaffolding to try to get up to that. But we know that science is one of the most difficult ones across the entire nation and state. And so there are some decisions that have been made at that level in terms of how scores are going to be done, but we know it's still a really important skill for students to have. And so when we look at those essential standards, something that we wanted to kind of highlight. And so you can see the questions that are there again, mimicking what students will see on the ACT as they go through. That one has the 5 questions. I did not have it in the copies here for you guys with all the answers that go with them. But the beautiful thing for the teachers is it goes in, it gives the answers, and then it gives the rationale why each one of those are there and the specific standard that it hits at for each of them. Now the data that's included in the presentation for you guys today is based on our winter WIG that was given. We're gonna say we were very disappointed by our results as a staff, but there were benefits that came from it for us that we were able to take. So we own it not only in terms of like timing and when it was given, but we also look at just how we can use that data to better ourselves in terms of our content literacy. So when you look at this, the light blue are the ones where students didn't meet mastery of that specific standard that was listed, the dark blue being those that met the level of mastery that's being set. Now also recognizing for the 0.1, 0.2, and 0.8, those are the ones where multiple questions would have been asked for that specific question. The 0.4 or 0.6, those only had a single question because there's only 10 questions total that are asked. And so those, of course, have a heavy sway in terms of how students perform. But the things that we were most looking at for this is because we had identified those specific standards primarily across all staff. They had said the 10.1 or 9 to 10.1, so R1 was being most important, R2 and then R8 as those key ones. So when we look at our 9th graders, we can see the one that they struggled with the most was the R.2, and so that one is talking about the summarization of texts, which our 9th grade team, Mr. Bierenbaum's gonna delve into in a little bit here when he gives his example of how then we're addressing that within our course content, knowing that on our 9th grade assessment, this was an area that was heavily lagging for students to be able to identify the key terms or identify the key information, which is 0.1 for the state standards, and then for the 0.2 being able to accurately summarize and kind of come up with those big key ideas. Which when we're looking at the scaffolding of our students, we would expect our 9th graders to struggle with that a little bit more because they haven't gone through the guaranteed and viable curriculum at the same level. When we look at our, oh, go ahead.
Before you go on,
Yeah,
while I'm thinking of this, how do you determine if you're in light blue or dark blue? Because we're not talking about standards-based grading, so is that I get it right or wrong, or I get it a B or better? How do you
So
decide
it's-
that?
It's within each question, the number of questions, and do they get it right or wrong? And then we've kind of set the threshold similar with each one of those for how proficient they are in that specific standard. So in Renaissance, then we said a student needs to be getting 60% or above on that standard to hit that level of proficiency.
Renaissance is the program,
Yes.
not the
Yes.
school.
Renaissance.
Yes, Renaissance, yes,
Just-
the
yeah.
program that we're using,
Yep.
sorry.
It's okay.
To be able to do the assessment that's in there. And so for the students not meeting mastery, that means they're scoring below a 60% on that specific standard.
So
is
does
there
that
being
mean on your
assessed.
example that you, which is, this is helpful, I'd have to, you said total of 10 questions,
Yes, and
but
so
in
for
this
the
one,
science,
I've got
there's
5, so how many do I have to get right in
Yeah.
order to?
So for our point, or for our point 1, on any of the given assessments, there's between 2 to 3 questions on R1, depending on their grade level. So if they are getting 2 of the questions wrong on that, they're not, 2 out of 3 questions wrong, they're not proficient, if that makes sense. Now, when we also, for a few of the questions, like we talked about in the fall, some of the questions had kind of 2 parts for it, so then there were half-point values that were given for each part that they would get right. And so just noting or looking at that for a few of the questions too. Specifically, when we're looking at the .4 questions, because that one oftentimes is related to key vocabulary. And so they would have to identify it and then be able to apply for some of those as well. When we look at 10th grade then, the standard that they, you see improvement for them on point 1 and point 2, which we would hope and expect for our 10th graders that have gone through the 9th grade curriculum. But then for the point 8, we see that being the greatest area of struggle. And that one's focusing on evaluating arguments and information within texts as the standard. And so it's getting a whole nother level where you're not just looking for the key information and details, but now you're actually evaluating the level of the argument that's in there. And so this one had 2 questions that were on there. So again, and that one had 2 parts for one of them. For 11th grade, and this was the one that was dumbfounding for us a little bit, where we had our moment of pause. But this is, with the 11th grade assessment, we had point 1, our point 1. Now 11th and 12th grade, the level of rigor for the standards does bump in 11th and 12th grade. But really, all 3 of our core ones that we had identified that students need to work on and that we found most paramount when we started this process were the 3 that we're seeing the 11th grade currently struggling more so with. Specifically, just being able to summarize and find the key information and details within the readings that they're doing. So with this in mind, we took kind of the middle school approach of standards and being able to look at it. And every one of our teachers at our last in-service day was given a spreadsheet with every student, how they had performed in the fall, how they had performed in the winter, and specific on each standard where they could look student by student for who they're serving and how they had scored on each one of those as well to try to kind of problem solve it a little bit more. And so that is where we currently were at with the standards. And our 11th grade teachers were able to dig into that then at our last in-service to try and say, why, right? And how do we try to address that now, between now and April 7th, when they'll be taking the ACT, which is right around the corner. And so that's been kind of the heavy lift that our staff have been focusing on since they took this in January. So now I'm going to hand it over for an example of how our teams have been addressing and looking at that WIG and how they've been serving our students. This is specific for our English 9 team because they're really building the foundation for all of this. So Mr. Bierenbaum's going to talk about English 9 and how they've been implementing and doing the WIG for their teams and kind of showing you guys an example there.
Right, so the ones you guys are talking about, the building ones.
Yes, we
So
were
those
talking about the
were
building.
In, was it October?
Yep, and then January.
Okay. But at each grade level, we started these tests, the WIG assessments last year, and we focused on, for English, we focused on just a couple of reading standards, these two. So these actually came from last year, but we have some tactics that we've been using, all the English teachers at every level. And one of those is it in that packet? Is there a handout that says how?
Yep.
Okay, so the essay that we shared was it's from a book of essays called American Like Me. With a bunch of famous people who wrote essays about what being an American meant to them. And this was Michelle Kwan, a figure skater that I remembered really well from when I was a kid. They didn't know who she was, so one of the things that we, yeah.
That's okay.
But so, well, what I did was dig around for some videos to show just, some of the things that she did, the amazing work she did on the ice. And so that was kind of one of the pre-learning things that I did. And we talked a little bit about, how she ended up in the Olympics and the World Championships and things. But then when they read the text, we used that Hugs. I didn't come up with that was other English teachers, but I adopted it and I really like that. So the H is for highlight, the U is for underline. So highlighting, the bigger idea is underlining key words, and the glossing that took me a little while to get used to. The glossing is like making it pretty by putting notes on or even drawing pictures and things, whatever helps them understand. The reading a little bit better, and after they read and highlight and underline and gloss and then summarize too, then they would take some reading comprehension questions, which are also attached there. And we used ChatGPT last year. Was it last year we started these? Yeah, last year. And that was a nice way to come up with a batch of questions we could choose from, and we just chose what we thought were the best ones. We chose them, was it ACT level 24 to 27, department, or DOK, depth of knowledge, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think. Anyway, that gave us some good questions to start with, and picking apart the key ideas. And so this assessment now we've been giving for 2 years. Was it first semester last year or second semester?
Second semester.
Second semester. So my group right now is the third time through this test, and they've been doing really well. In fact, last year they did better than we wanted to make it more difficult. So Sarah Wong actually picked through and wrote some of the questions a little bit more difficult, not a little more difficult level. And the scores did dip a little bit, which I thought was good because it's good to give them some struggle on these things. And we give, in English 9, we give a total of 4 of these. Read a little bit and take some questions. The next one coming up is about marriage customs in Elizabethan England. And we have 2 other ones in the next quarter. So we can kind of give them practice with these questions, which I think is nice. I think it's a good idea. So,
So the increased level of rigor and then having the combination, every department, kids are getting the reading instruction, both at the universal level as well as within the content literacy, and then for them to be able to see the level of rigor of what's actually expected with ACT level questions with the building-wide assessment. We've had our students have some jaw-dropping moments when the science article came their way. This last time, a few of them were like, oh, this is really difficult. We're like, yes, this is what we need to be prepared for. So that's been positive.
In summary, we took a few steps back with increasing our rigor, specifically with the science example that you see in front of us. I think there's also a bit of a disconnect. We're doing great academic practice in each of our classrooms, like we talked about last semester and we talked about earlier this year. The disconnect now that we have, and I'll use I'm using you as an example. October, when I give you the assessment as a junior in 16 or 17 in the middle of the football season, and you get that science reading assessment with little to no accountability, grading, etc. in your homeroom, how serious are you going to take it? So we're struggling with that piece because right now we don't have the full intervention models in place from an accountability standpoint. So if you really did struggle on that, we're trying to get that level of accountability there. So again, we're working with high school students. So they like, the academic practice that Mike's sharing and all of our colleagues are sharing is fantastic, because it's embedded into the curriculum, it's embedded into that. We needed to pull out a standalone assessment tied to our ACT. This is a redacted ACT essay. But getting our students, quote unquote, to buy in on the October and the January assessment is now challenging for us. So we're curious, really, with our pre-ACT coming up on the 7th, which is in 10 plus days, right? How they really do, because we believe our kids will take that assessment way more seriously than the one we delivered to them on their Chromebook in January. Our hope is that we still see the good efforts of the academic practice that's going on in our classroom, but also seeing benchmark data that we have both in October and January, and having a clearer picture coming up in the spring for you. One of the things that we're looking into a little bit too, and we're talking about it, if you look at some of the other sides of it, we are, as Lisa stated, expanding our literacy interventions from 2 blocks to 4, which will give a literacy option for students each and every term of the year. So if and when we do identify students in October, we now have a vehicle to work with those particular students, and we'll be able to do that throughout the year. Our data collection has gotten better. Our staff is using that data, just as Mr. Chapin had said. And again, I think we're going to get better with that. Two of the things that we're going to talk through with our building leadership team and our PLC leadership teams is tying this back to educator effectiveness. Taking that data, the data that they're doing within the classrooms, making sure, again, we're tying it specifically to their SLO and PPG, and continuing to provide those added supports for our teachers, who then in turn are in the trenches working with kids to practice literacy. The last thing we think, and again, we're one of the last to adopt it, would be the practice ACT. We really want to get on board with having a practice ACT for our students in fall, not just our redacted exam, but to really be transparent with where the students are at in that practice ACT, so we have goals set with each individual student within their wins to work on the work that they need to improve on. We know, again, that reading across all of those content areas in the ACT makes a difference. That's why we picked that goal, but we have plenty of more work to do. Any questions?
I just have a comment. Before Michelle Kwan was skating, I went off to college, and the very first test I took, and I studied harder than I'd ever studied in my life, was in psychology. I thought I was ready, and I wasn't. I failed it. I went and talked to that professor, and I was horrified. I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna get through college. He went through and said, here's what you do when you're studying or trying to comprehend, and I was not a great reading comprehension. Take your highlighter, highlight the big things. Take a pencil, underline things. Go back and write, take notes on what you've read. So I still have notebooks of college courses that I took. And he used it in the psychology. He said the more sense you put it into, he said the better off you're gonna be. Read your notes back to yourself. Go study in the room you're gonna take if you're studying for a test. Go back into, and I tell you what, I went back and studied in that room, and I looked at a clock and it got the answer. And your surroundings. So
Yeah.
this was.
It's good practice.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I don't want to take the credit because Andy Krizek is the one who formatted it that way with the note column and all that.
Right.
But the kids are doing great. They're highlighting,
Right.
drawing arrows and writing words.
It's a life skill that they will use forever.
You mentioned practice. Is there a timed aspect on this, on the reading assessments throughout the year? Because that's a big part of the ACTs,
Yes.
is the timing. As so many students who are really good with the reading comprehension, all of a sudden see the little clock in the top and they just panic and they shut down, and it's a big limiting factor for a lot of students who are generally really good readers and good at comprehending and interpreting that. So is that an aspect at all of that?
That's why we chose 2 excerpts in 30 minutes for our students to practice in that. We know that that's a time portion of that, and with students answering and reading 2 in 30 minutes is getting close to that threshold that you're talking about. Again, our staff at our last in-service presented on how to improve in terms of the reading and summarization on the ACT. So all of our juniors should have received that lesson just shortly 2 weeks ago, right before
It
Oh,
doesn't
spring
have
break.
the stress of the countdown clock on the screen. That is not there, but they know the parameters of how long win is, so.
Yeah.
So I have I have a question about the test. I think this is, this is good, and I'm glad that you've added the charts, because I think that's a really important part of this. So I understand the value of this for me as a student. I'm getting practice doing this, learning skills, developing that. I understand it from the standpoint of a teacher. This is giving me feedback about how my students are doing. But what happens if I've done these 5 questions and I got 2 of them wrong? Is anybody following up with me? This is how you can think about that,
Right.
to figure out where I went off.
Yeah, not as of right now, that's the
Okay.
piece that we're talking about.
That's the next
is,
step, huh?
We have the data, we know where things are at. The
Okay.
vehicles of either accountability or talking individually with our students are occurring subtly at our WIN levels with our WIN teachers, right? They're looking at that data that they have with those particular pockets of students. We're beginning to identify those students that really do need literacy interventions. But again, creating the vehicles and the nodes of communication and really intervening at that level is not quite there yet.
Well,
The-
that
the-
takes a lot of time.
It does.
I mean, that would be a lot of time for a
And
student.
trying to, it's really hard to look at an assessment that doesn't carry a lot of weight, if I'm being honest, when we put it in front of kids as regular, reliable data to automatically walk a kid into an intervention at that point. We want to make sure we have multiple points of data. These are just 2 points of that. So we're going to have to be looking at other modalities in that and other forms of that as we get into our data protocols.
That's why it's important for teachers to be able to see like what generally for my students, what do they struggle with, so they can at least address that in the classroom for the higher areas of struggle. Because that's kind of a midpoint between what you're talking about and where we are right now.
And that can also be really helpful sometimes with practice ACT from the fall, because some of those, depending on how it would be administered, the students can still get more of those individualized kind of reports or pieces where they can then log in to be able to see that. So depending on how we would do that, that can also give some individual ones, even for a high achieving kid that might not fall into a threshold where they would get scooped into an intervention where they might get that feedback, they still might be able to see their individual one to know target areas.
Well, because every kid, a student who doesn't do well, but a student who does really well also needs the support to figure out how can they grow on the ones they got wrong, so.
And I think in closing, when we first got the data, we were all slumped in our chairs in our office, like, what did we do? It's on us, right? But we then thought about the opportunities and the things that it's provided for us. Like, we are so much better as a building system with our teachers and data protocols, with our students having exposure to literacy at these levels. If we didn't create this leverage goal, we wouldn't be driving this bus as hard as we are. And so we looked back at it and go, okay, it's 2 steps back in this, but we still need to charge forward. But the good that is coming from this is tremendous. And so we appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I appreciate that you brought these examples, because it makes it come to life, so, thank you.
Question and a comment, maybe, or 2 questions. How are the students processing these texts? Are they reading them online? Are they reading them in handheld?
They're online, because again, the ACT is online. And the way we deliver it and collect that data is through their Chromebooks and that.
For the building ones,
For the building
online.
ones, yes.
For the individual ones
For the
in classrooms,
integrated.
it differs by
Teacher and subject matter.
content and subject matter.
I have the ability to get cookies, so you can highlight them, so you can underline.
Because, when Mike talked about that, I mean, immediately when I saw this sort of thing, I was immediately gonna take my pen and start underlining, which is.
Now, on the ACT, they do have highlighting and note-taking options that.
And they do in Renaissance. So that was one of the biggest kind of requests from staff from last year, was to have something where students could begin familiarizing themselves and practicing in an online system. And so really that's the gift or the benefit that Renaissance has brought, because it also has the highlighting tools and all of the features in there that students kind of get to have that pre-practice with. Because many of our teachers were saying, when I'm in class, I'm teaching them on the paper, and all of a sudden they switch to the online and they freeze for a moment. So that was our reason and our rationale for wanting to have a building one and have practice tools that would be similar to what they would be doing, kind of like Mike talked about with those psych.
So you've got the software, you've got the goal, you've got the teachers on board, and you work on it. What are the biggest things you face that are difficult? I mean, we've talked before, and the board is well aware of the fact that once they get into upper elementary grades, the longer they go and haven't mastered reading, the harder it gets. And this has been a puzzle forever, but when they get to university and they haven't mastered it, it seems like it's almost impossible. So what are those hurdles that you face that you're up against?
You talk first.
Well, with Mary Death, the English department had a meeting a month ago or so, or is it not even that long ago, where the elementary coaches came in. And so now they're attacking like phonics type things at a lower level, and that's gonna make a huge difference, because we have kids who can't sound out words even, so vocabulary is really tough. So it kinda looks like we're going at it the right way, starting early, and being able to read better that way. Some of the kids now who are in high school didn't have that. I had that when I was growing up, the sounding out words. And so I think that's one way that we're gonna really advance coming up here.
I think sustained attention too for students is one that we're just always trying to build. For students, especially when it comes to online platforms and reading, and really teaching for close reading versus the skim and scroll that a lot of our students currently have, because they'll try to just quickly go back and forth versus using the hug strategy and first looking for that key information and then going back for that. So really instilling and giving those practice opportunities for the close reading, and then building the sustained attention to tasks in today's digital age. So for students, that's a big one. And then for us, administratively, and for teachers, we kind of put it on there in white, but it's the student by student graph or growth tracking for all of our staff to be able to then see and know the specific needs, specific standards per kid, so that we can kind of do, like Stacy said, giving the individualized feedback to students and targeting what they need versus here's what my class currently needs right now. Because right now we're really at that tier 1 piece versus being able to give some of the more targeted pieces.
Are there things that hold them back? And by this I mean, because you're talking about the specific things that you can do and handle on it. And in the narrative that we're hearing all the time out there is that kids don't read as much because of their phones, or there's a reluctance to read, or it's COVID, or there's all these kinds of things that people say, this is why kids aren't reading today. Is it those kinds of things, or are there more technical things? Those are hard for you to address. You're telling us what you can address here.
I do think it's part of the technological age we live in. Our kids live in an age of instant gratification. And a book doesn't give you instant gratification like it used to, right? You have to read a whole book. You have to see and get through parts of a book to get delayed gratification in that, right? And so they have things at their fingertips or anywhere else where it's instant dopamine, instant gratification. Even with my own 6th grade daughter at home, who hopefully is reading tonight, her 30 minutes, like we practice reading each night 30 minutes. It's one of us that are doing that. Because again, the level of resiliency that we are seeing in our 14 to 18-year-old students is less for silent, sustained reading like this. We had a little bit of a tech issue, and I'm not blaming the data for that. And as Mr. Jakula talked about a little bit and Ben said, in one of our groups we couldn't log in. And so we had several teams trying to help our students log in, and then 30 minutes turned into 20 minutes or 15 minutes, and that pace picked up, and those kids, you know, if it's me, a Kid Lidkey as a sophomore in there, I want to get that assessment done. So I'm not making the poor excuse of that, but we have tech issues that are related to that too. It's a combination of a lot of things, Alan. It's a very deep question. I think the big thing that we are working on is, again, having our tiered systems of support and structuring that framework really hard this year and working through that, talking about that with our leadership teams. That's one of the main reasons we did our site visits, so that we can have leveled supports for students coming into next academic year with the data protocols that we have in place. That's our goal, is to actually respond to the data with our students and get drilled down into it student by student. That's the only way we'll create that level change that we're looking at and looking for.
Thank you for your work.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here and answering our questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Ben, could you give us a report, please? And maybe you could also tell us about your adventure that you had when you weren't here last time, the music.
Oh, yeah, okay, I can do that. Well, I'll start with the school stuff. A little bit before break, the girls hockey team went to state and made it to the final round, and they unfortunately didn't win, but they were still the state runner-ups, which is a pretty big title, I'd say, for that. And then the week before break, I know it was FFA week, and there were some things going on with that, and everyone who was involved with that seemed very hyped up about that. And then we had spring break, which I think was a very positive thing around the district. Lots of kids are coming back sunburnt, and other kids are coming back refreshed, hopefully. And now we're just into this time of the year where the juniors at the high school are preparing for the ACT, and the other 9th and 10th graders are preparing for the pre-ACT, and then the seniors are starting to finalize their post-secondary plans. Many figuring out where they're going to college and getting those results back, and others are figuring out what they're going to do after high school, which is exciting to see and be a part of. I don't know a whole lot about the elementary and middle school right now, but I know at the high school things are moving along pretty well, and I think as we get closer to the end of the third quarter here, kids are excited for some new things coming along, so it'll be fun.
That's great.
Thanks, Ben. Oh, no, I'll share a little bit about my.
Please do.
I don't know, I think 2 weeks ago I had the opportunity to go and premiere one of my musical works at a school down south, Sun Prairie West High School. Their concert band performed it, and the piece was written about a girl named River who has a limb loss disorder, and the piece is just talking about how her life isn't that much different than ours. She's had to adapt to a lot of things and had to overcome some adversity. However, she plays on the playground like your average kid would, and so I just kind of really tried to interpret that the best I could, and got to meet a lot of cool people. Got to do a lot of great experiences and work with a really cool foundation called Limitless Wisconsin. That turns out there's kids all over the state that are part of this foundation that are really trying to make a difference for kids that work through limb loss and limb differences. And so that's a really cool and really fun experience to be a part of. So.
And who conducted your piece?
It was their band director, Matt McVeigh. And so, close friend of mine, actually. So,
yes.
Yeah, so it was very cool.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get to do this? Is it through that friendship?
Yeah, well, so my parents are friends with the director down there, and they go through a program called Sing Me a Story, which is based out of Woodbury, but they do stuff all across the nation. And they basically find usually a collegiate level composer or someone that the band director knows, and they reach out to them and ask them to commission this piece. And they work with a school, a composer, and then they find a kid in the area, usually the district, who suffers with some sort of, whether that's a disease or some sort of hindering effect on their life. And so I was selected by this organization, Sing Me a Story, and then I worked with them through this process for a while, and then I got to do that. So it was a really cool experience, and I really feel really fortunate to be able to be a part of it. So.
And did River get to hear it?
Yes, River was there. I got a photo with River and was able to give her some stuff about that too. So that was awesome.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Yes. Cool.
Congratulations on that. All right, Superintendent report.
All right, well, I'm feeling like my report after two really awesome WIG reports, a great peace report, and then Ben's summary. This is going to kind of slide in here. But, yes, that's right. But that's right. But tons of awesome things to hear about. It was great to listen to that. So what I wanted to report on is over the last 6 weeks, Stacy and I have been visiting monthly township board meetings. So we've gotten to Clifton, Martell, Kinnickinnick, Pleasant Valley, and Troy. We haven't been able to connect with the town of River Falls. We're going to work on that, but they're meeting right now. And that's the tricky piece, is they meet basically at the exact times that we meet. So we're going to try to work out or find an alternative way to give them the update as well. But the goal of the visit was really twofold: to share a brief update from the school district, and then also just to extend our gratitude of support. And really, it's one of our priorities, obviously, to maintain communication, and those meetings and those leaders within that community is a way that we can achieve and do that. And so we provided an update, and the update's there. We talked about our facilities update. We brought the most recent community ed all of those
Newsletter.
things. Everyone said it. That was nice for us we left those, so if they are interested in signing up, they could do that.
And you've done this before, especially when we're talking about the passing referendum.
Correct. And the key thing that we wanted to stress this time was, we're not trying to pass anything. We're not going for a referendum. There's no campaign that we were looking for them to endorse. This was truly just an update.
The specifics.
Yep.
I bet they liked it.
We talked about our district and school report cards, and then we did talk a lot about enrollment and financial forecasting. We wanted to make sure that these partners understand the elements and components that contribute to why we had a referendum in the first place, where we're forecasting our enrollment, how that impacts property taxes, which is obviously something that comes up quite a bit in their world and their sphere, and we wanted to have names and faces for them to either A, be able to respond to, or also B, just to say, hey, why don't you give the superintendent a call?
Great.
He might be interested in hearing that information. So, and then we also talked about the strategic plan, and we know that our current strategic plan ends in 2027, and we're starting that process of looking into a vision of what our next 5-year strategic plan will look like, and they're partners that we want to make sure that they're aware of. So that was what we have been doing, and it's nice to get out to those different spaces.
And I think it's fair to say that people appreciated it.
Yeah, no
we
one
got
threw
thanks.
anything at
Nobody
us.
threw-
Yeah,
yeah.
no, obviously, it was wonderful, yeah.
Yeah.
Sliced your tires while you were.
No, and all kidding aside, awesome, super welcoming, and
Yeah.
it's fun
It's a
to
good thing.
get to different pieces of the community. Yeah.
Dedicated public servants in those
That's
places
right.
too.
You know, when I read that you guys had done this again, because I know we've done it with referendums and stuff as an update. This is a big undertaking to do this. I mean, it's
Yeah.
such a night commitment and all that, and you've done the presentations before, so I really appreciate the fact that you two are taking the time to do this. And I can imagine that the townships boards are appreciating it too, because they often don't get included in stuff that's going on around.
Yep.
But they do hear an awful lot about property taxes. So I think that this is a good connection to have, so I really appreciate the fact that you guys have been doing this.
All right, we're going to move on to action items. Would any board member like to remove anything from the consent agenda? All right, then we have minutes from the February 23rd regular school board meeting. We have bills that have been submitted for payment. We have employment recommendations, and then we have a long list in item 4 of second reading of our new Neola policies. And then item 5 will be the first reading of many more Neola policies. Is there a motion to approve all of those items?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Allison. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried 6-0. All right, the ad hoc committee met on March 2nd. We have 5 policies in front of us for approval for the first reading. Dave is going to go through them. But before we do that, I wanted, just to make sure everybody understands how carefully the ad hoc committee goes through every one of these items. So we have good conversation, we try to understand what's going on, we compare it to what our recollection is of previous policies. Sometimes we make adjustments and expect to have some changes. So with that, could you go through
Sure.
these?
So
And
the
then,
first-
just one thing, and then after that, I'll take one motion for all 5 of them.
Yeah. The first thing that I wanted to mention is when you look at the new format, the new Neola policies, one thing that we didn't have in the new format that we liked in the old format was a cross-reference section. So we had a conversation with Neola, and that's something when we do that final approval, which will come once we've done all of the individual series approvals, you'll see those cross-references added. So that's some work that will be taking place, but based on some of the conversations that took place at the ad hoc committee, you'll see those in the final draft of it. That's one thing. And then within 5111, which is the eligibility, I have a couple of updates. In letter G, the feedback from the ad hoc committee was it would make more sense. They had a general resident district and non-resident district, and we inserted the words River Falls to make sure people be able to track what was actually going on in that sentence and those sentences in letter G. So the only adjustment there is using the words River Falls to note the resident district. And then at the end, what we did is same thing. We adjusted some wording in letter P, which was related to a situation that almost never happens, and that's a situation in which a student attempted to enroll that had been expelled from another district. And basically, in almost every situation when that happens, that student is denied to be able to be enrolled. However, Neola's recommendation, and the one we took, is that you would leave yourself the ability to make an adjustment, but that adjustment would have to be approved by the school board at the recommendation of the superintendent. So that's what number 1 says in a more concise way than what was discussed before. And the only other piece that we did is we cut another section that had been part of the prior recommendation around conditional enrollment. That's not something that we would do in an expulsion situation. So that's the update to 5111, and I'll just keep moving on if that's okay. So 5310 was health services. The Neola recommendation didn't have sort of an introductory paragraph, so we picked some language that we had from our prior policy, and that's that first paragraph that just introduces the intent and purpose of why we have school health services. But the actual content there didn't change besides that introductory paragraph, which was some language from our old policy. Then moving on to immunization. Initially, the last paragraph, second to last paragraph, and last paragraph were not included in what we talked about at the ad hoc committee, but the committee recommended that we add that language back, which basically just says what happens if a student is not immunized or they failed to submit a written waiver. And basically, at that point, the student can be withheld from being able to be enrolled if they don't have one of those two things. So either they have the immunization record or they've completed the waiver process. And the waiver process is granted for medical, religious, or personal convictions. So that basically outlines that piece, and then the last paragraph basically says you can't exclude somebody for 10 or more days without sort of having a hearing and a notice with the child. So you can't just like let them hang out there forever. There has to be outreach as well. So that was the piece that was added in there. Moving on to 5514, this was really just a very brief adjustment in paragraph 2 to be very clear in when students can use personal transportation devices. So in my time, that was a bike, and now there's lots of cool different personal transportation devices out there for kids to use. And so basically, use of those devices on campus is prohibited except for the purpose of traveling to and from school. So if they're getting to school and setting that thing in the bike rack or leaving, grabbing it from the bike rack and leaving, that's fine. Otherwise, they shouldn't be using it. And the way that it was worded was a little confusing. We just wanted to be as clear as possible with that one. And then in 561003, which is the next policy, we adopted the language abeyance, which is a common vocabulary term that we use here. And abeyance means keeping the expulsion at bay or delaying that, and it outlines in here what that is. We really didn't change anything except that language around the term abeyance as opposed to pre-expulsion, because that's the vocabulary that we use in this district, even though what it means is the same thing. So those are my updates for that.
Is there a motion to approve items 1 through 5, the first readings of these Neola policies?
So moved.
Thank you, Bo.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Motion is carried. Mike, I'll turn to you for an update on finance and facilities.
All right, we had our meeting on Monday, March 9th. The first thing, as we usually do, we reviewed our budget and kind of where we are. Some highlights, we talked in Fund 10, our general fund, Source 971, which would be a workman comp dividend that we got back, about $228,000, over $228,000 work dividend, or work comp dividend. We talked about our special ed funding, which is coming in at about 35% reimbursement, which is below the state of 43%, I think it was, right? 42%. We've gotten 3 out of our 6 payments total so far, and we're running at that 35%. The hope is the last payment, they'll play catch up once they know what the final numbers would be for the districts in the state. In Fund 39, we talked about interest earnings. We have one of the benefits of our timing on our referendum is we pulled a lot of revenue in and we put it into interest-bearing accounts, so we were able to earn some interest on those. So we're having discussions about what to do with some of those interest earnings. One of the alternatives would be to keep in that fund so we can use it for future debt payments, which would help reduce the levy on our taxpayers. On the expense side, We talked a little bit about food service. As with everything else, the cost of feeding our kids is going up, and so we might end the year with a deficit in our food service fund, so we will be having to address that at some point. So that was our discussion on our budget. We also talked about high cost special education aid update. We were working at that time on a potential grant that we had submitted for a $200,000 grant for that, and maybe you can talk a little bit about.
Yeah, it's actually a categorical aid
An aid.
reimbursement. Mhm.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and Mark's in the room, and he did most of the heavy lifting for all of that. What he submitted was a total of $231,000 in costs, and the way that works is it's costs per student that are above $30,000 after categorical reimbursement is already taken into consideration. So these are students with, significant needs and costs for the district, and so there is that categorical aid available to districts. One of the other things that was touted in the state budget was an increase in reimbursement for high-cost aid. They were saying 90%, which we know based on other things that were said in the state budget for reimbursement, it will likely not reach 90%. 90% of what? Of our total costs. So we submitted $231,000 in costs. If it reaches 90%, we're gonna get $208,000 back. We don't think it will come in at that. Okay. So we're just hopeful.
But which fund
For
are we talking
high
about?
cost
Special
This will be
needs?
for Fund 27. 27,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Yeah, so a total of 28 students that were submitted at that cost that cost level, above the 30,000.
And a high cost would be $30,000 per student.
After taking out whatever we're already getting back in reimbursement, special ed reimbursement, correct. So that's the high And cost. what's happening? Are they even back in session? They're not, are they? I don't believe so. Are they?
They wouldn't have to be back in
No.
session for this. This was
No.
part of the original budget.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
this
right.
is just kind of like, now that we've had a chance for this year to go through it, we've, through Mark's work, been able to do a calculation to determine
we would just
what their adjustment, when they said we're moving high cost reimbursement to 90%, what was that, what's that actual impact for us? We had to go through and identify all of the children who would qualify, figure out what that total cost is, take 90% of that and say, this is what we're hoping to get.
Yeah.
And the good news is, it's probably higher than we expected.
Yeah.
But we don't know if that's actually what we'll see in the percentage reimbursement, just like our regular special ed aid, which they projected at 42, but right now is at 35.
Right. In order to see an increase in the regular special ed fund, they would have to go back in
Correct.
session and allocate some of the excess funds we have at the state level to add funding to that, which we haven't heard they're doing, right?
Right.
Yeah. In fact, I haven't heard anything that the assembly is coming back in session before next January. I haven't heard anything.
If they have a deal, they'll come in they'll do a
Right.
special session. Have you ever heard anything today?
No.
I didn't see anything today.
No, I didn't see anything today.
There's lots of talk that the Senate Majority Leader and the House Speaker and the Governor are all interested in doing something on this, that they gotta kind of keep circling each other for a long time and positioning themselves, but I keep hearing that there's a possibility of some kind of a deal out here yet in the next couple of months, so fingers crossed.
Stay tuned.
And all three of them are retiring from their
Yes.
positions,
Yes.
so maybe that's the way you get things done, is people are in their last,
You're not coming back.
I think they all have an opportunity to do a legacy here, and so it's just a matter of getting past the rhetoric, each of the three, and that's something done, so. I don't know if we could hear anything today, but at that point, then they would call a special session. Very clearly
yeah.
defined, come in, vote on it, and.
Okay, Mike?
All right, so next on our agenda was the summer capital maintenance project list update. So every year we update our 10-year maintenance projects, capital projects, and so we went through some of the things that we would like to see done over the next 10 years with our capital budget. We've set aside about $650,000 per year for these bigger projects that we do generally during the summer when school is closed or shut down. So we are looking to take the $650,000 that we have budgeted for this year and push it off into future years. We're gonna be pretty busy this summer with finishing up our referendum projects, and so we would use those funds in future years for some of those larger projects. We went through a potential change to our parking lot, added parking at the high school. One of the things we've identified is we're kind of short on parking for big events and for those kinds of things at school. We have kids parking out in the street, and so we're looking at adding some parking. One of the benefits of having that turf field we have, which gets a heck of a lot of use, is we don't have as many needs for the grass fields in the back. So we're thinking of potentially taking a grass field and turning it into a parking lot. Potentially, so we're just looking at those options. The other issue is with some of our bus parking and the interaction between buses and cars and students walking, so changing maybe the way we do our morning pickup and drop off with the buses. So that's all part of a plan that we're just kind of discussing at this time.
It can get real dangerous out in like the parking lots right now at the high school,
Right.
especially in the mornings and especially in the neighborhood area with all the cars parked there on both sides and then cars coming through. You gotta feel bad for the people who live there who have to like commute in the morning.
Right.
You can never get out, so.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
We're working on it. Probably not before you graduate, but we're working on it. Then we also annually, generally it's annually, we purchase a bus. It's generally one bus or two buses, or sometimes we throw in a Suburban or whatever needs to be replaced. So we go on about 13-year cycles with our buses, is that right? 13, 14 years?
Sounds about right.
Right, so we cycle through. So we went through and looks like we are gonna be getting a bus. The cost of buses have gone up over the last 10 years. So we are making a purchase from Nelson Bus Service for $149,623 for 72 passengers. Two buses. And they would be 72 passengers. It includes the cameras and some of the things that we spec out on our buses. So we will buy two of those buses for $149,623 each with budgeted funds. These are funds that we had in the budget for 26-27 fiscal year. And then that was it.
Thank you. So is there a motion to approve the updated summer capital maintenance projects list?
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll
Is there a
second.
second? Thank you, Mike. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried. And then is there a motion to approve the purchase of 2 route buses from Nelson's Bus Service in the amount of $149,623 each?
So moved.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Or no, Bo. Any discussion?
And just,
Yeah.
because we're moving fast on this, but anybody who's watching this or whatnot, this was a competitive bidding process and the memos attached and all that, so this wasn't just.
We saw.
Yeah, we had two
Yep.
bids.
And this is Nelson is a bus service that we have had very good luck with, and good customer service, so that we've been very pleased with them over the years. Anything else?
Well, maybe just to point out that the bid for the Nelson bus was slightly higher than the bill for the Ascendance truck, or excuse me.
Not when you
But
added,
not when you add
the.
Not when you added in the extra things. So on the
Right.
surface, it might look like it was more, but it isn't really.
It isn't more, yep. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried. All right, the Personnel Committee met on March 9th, and during that meeting, we heard a staffing update for the 2026-27 school year. We also reviewed several job descriptions, and then we recommend that the board adopt those adjustments, which has come before the board tonight. The committee spent a considerable time receiving an update regarding the administration's recommendation regarding an insurance plan for 26-27. And then we went into closed session to discuss preliminary and final notices of non-renewal for certified staff. So we're going to get into the action item, but as we do, I want to provide some background about the insurance recommendation that we have tonight. So, as a reminder for folks, the board delegates the responsibility to research insurance options to the administration. When we do that, the board requests that the administration provides a very reasoned recommendation to the board for our consideration and then potential action. As part of that research process, administration has employed an insurance broker, people who are experts in the area in the insurance field and are able to advocate for the district's best interests. And we have seen over time that they have done well for us. And then, I think, in my estimation, as a wise move, the administration has established an insurance study committee, which includes users, people, teachers, staff who will be using this insurance to help sort through the options and then provide feedback to the administration. After all of that is done, then the administration provides a recommendation to the board. At the last personnel committee, we had an extensive presentation and conversation about the options and about the administration's recommendation. And so Nate's going to, with that background, give an update and then make the recommendation for the board's consideration.
Sounds good. I will give a seemingly brief summary here on our insurance process, a process that started almost a year ago with our broker Gallagher, and a strategy team which consists of Lynette, Dave, myself, and Amanda Hoopert meeting regularly with our brokers, and then the strategy team also meeting with our insurance study committee. The insurance study committee is a voluntary committee made up of staff members throughout the district in lots of different capacities, not unlike our calendar committee or our wellness committee or our council for student experience committee. So when we have big decisions to make that are going to influence our stakeholders, we want to give them as much voice and opportunity to be participants and provide input in processes that impact them. So we knew that we were running towards the end of our 2-year plan with Health Partners in a fully funded insurance plan. That was coming to a close at the end of this year, and for us that marks June 30th. So we needed to have another option. And to start that process, you go out to bid just like you do for buses. You go out to bid with insurance providers to see who's going to give us a good price and continue to provide a good benefit for our staff. And this year we went out to 5 different providers to receive bids. We went out to Medica, Allina Health, Anthem Blue Cross, Health Partners, and United Health. And 3 of the 5 declined to engage in the bidding process with us. So 3 were out off the top. United Health and Health Partners did provide bids, and the bids came back very, very high. So when that happens, then you engage in a negotiation process, and there's some back and forth to try and get those bids down to a number that fits within our budget while also maintaining a high-performing benefit for our stakeholders. I should also add that generally we engage in 2-year commitments with providers, and 3 didn't provide any bid, and the 2 that did said we'll do it for 1 year. One group, United, said we won't bid for a self-funded plan. Health Partners said we'll give you a fully funded option and a self-funded option. So through this back and forth, we also examined a number of different options, knowing that we probably wouldn't be able to negotiate a cost down to a reasonable increase, that we would have to make some plan design changes. And we considered everything and looked at all of the data and the impact of making those changes on the financial expense, but also against the cost of the benefit in terms of what it provides our stakeholders. So we looked at the max out of pocket. We looked at how much the deductible is currently and if we needed to increase that. We looked at premium contributions, HSA contributions, network changes, different options, and deductible options, and then different combinations of all of those to try and come to something that we felt was going to be the best. In the end, the strategy committee, through the help of Gallagher, found that the best insurance at the most reasonable cost was to stick with Health Partners through a self-funded insurance plan, which came to us at about a 10% increase, which is reasonable and comparable to what we've experienced in the last couple of years when we've engaged in 2-year bidding processes with these providers. Deductibles were staying the same. The max out-of-pocket would change. The contributions to the premiums would stay the same. The HSA contributions would stay the same. And of course, there's an increase to the overall cost. We knew that was coming. So by going to self-funded and negotiating the way we did, we really only had to make one change that was viewed or would be viewed somewhat negatively because of the cost associated with it, which is the increase in the max out-of-pocket. So that was a win. We also added a telehealth and in-home health option that can be free to our users in a lot of different ways, even with certain meds, and that program is called Kavira. So that's an added benefit that we are investing in as a district to try and support our users and keep things as financially reasonable as possible. So then the strategy group presented to our insurance study committee. They were able to ask questions, provide input, and generally they were very, very pleased with the outcome because they understand the landscape of health and dental insurance these days. So that's where we're at. We're also sticking with our self-funded dental plan, which we've had for the last couple of years. There will be a 4% increase for that. The impact of the 4% is negligible when compared to the 10% increase for health because it's a much smaller cost overall. And then we continue to provide voluntary insurance options for our staff to engage in. So they can have the IMED benefit or supplemental health in terms of things like accident, critical illness, or hospital indemnity. And those come through the standard, a different provider, and there's no increase in cost through that. We have a partnership agreement for, I think, through 28. So overall, a very thorough process, a lot of back and forth between the broker, the strategy group, the broker, the strategy group, and the insurance study committee, and then the presentation to the personnel now coming to you tonight. Feeling pretty good about where we ended up.
And we are confident that even moving to self-insurance, that this will not put a burden on our staff.
Right. As part of the process, we will have Health Partners as our third-party administrator. So there will be some work for our own staff, but it's going to be minimal. And in terms of how it impacts the user, it's really not going to change things for them. They'll have their insurance card. They'll still have choice if they want to have an open access or a more narrow network and therefore have a smaller premium cost. They can go to the same doctors, the same clinics, the same hospitals that they've been. They won't really recognize any difference.
Thank you, Nate. Any questions for Nate?
Good job.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Nate.
One thing when we talk about estimates, we're doing kind of that cast forward approach where we are looking at if everybody in our district stayed and everybody in our district stayed with exactly the same plan. And so that's an estimate right now because at the time that the board makes the decision to approve whatever plan that we have, then Nate and Amanda mainly, and then with support from Gallagher, will go through the process of open enrollment, and that's the opportunity for employees who are staying with us to make decisions on if they're going to make adjustments. And whatever those adjustments are will impact what our estimated costs were. If more people choose to move to a family plan, that estimate will be below. If more people choose to say, well, now this is getting kind of expensive, I can go to a different option and go off of insurance that'll actually be less expensive. Plus, we know that not all of our employees are going to stay, so some leave, and if they leave, depending on the choices that the people newly hired will make. I just want to stress that we do our best to put estimates on there right down to a pretty exact amount, but just understand that behind that number is a theory that casts forward that we know it gives us our best chance to make that estimate, but it's never going to happen exactly like that.
And that's not particular to being self-insured. That's
Correct.
all that's
Yep.
always how
That's
we
right.
manage this.
That's right, yep, and then, as we talked about at length at the Personnel Committee, we talked about, the mechanisms that we have within self-insurance to ensure that we're not putting ourselves at risk for something that's unforeseen. And that's why we can, with a great deal of certainty, have a pretty good idea of what our percentage increase is, and then year over year, make those adjustments as needed.
And Dave, since you mentioned open enrollment, which is always the first 15 days in May, preceding that in the middle to end of April, we'll hold insurance listening sessions or informational sessions at a lot of the buildings because we want to get this information out to anybody that wants to hear it. We'll also have a virtual session, which will happen in the evening, that will be recorded. So there'll be no shortage of opportunities for our stakeholders to understand and ask questions about how insurance is going to look next year compared to this year and what their options are. So we're going to give them plenty of opportunities to become educated.
Thank you for that.
Okay, I have one question, Nate, just a quick question. When you click on the link and you go to the more detailed data
Yep.
on the right-hand column where you're looking at the bundle, number 1, self-funded, can you just remind me down below that, the 2,000-80%, what is the percentage there?
I'm just trying to find where you are.
Co-insurance, it's what point?
Oh, yes, yeah, that's one of
So-
that's one of the changes when we make an adjustment to our max out-of-pocket, which used to be equivalent to the deductible. Now it's going to be different than that.
Right.
Once a person goes beyond the deductible, there will be a co-insurance, which means the user will pay 20% of the cost.
20%.
Insurance will pay
Up to the
80%.
max out-of-pocket, and the max
That's correct.
out-of-pocket is what for?
Twice the deductible.
Twice the deductible.
Yep.
Okay, so the deductible is 2,000
Well, for an individual.
for an individual,
Yep.
4,000.
But there's options, 4,000 for a family, or there's a 4,000, 8,000 option.
8,000, the two different
Yep.
options. So the 2,000, so the co-insurance would pay 80%, I would pay 20% up to
Up to whatever your max out-of-pocket is.
max out-of-pocket
Yep.
is. Okay, yeah, that'll be important for people to know, because that's a big change.
It is a big change, but one of the reasons we chose that as a lever to pull to keep our costs down is that
Yeah.
we, in researching, found that there were only about 35% of our users who met their deductible.
Yeah.
So again, things can change from year to year. We all know that as people who have to go to the doctor or go to hospitals from time to time. But if that stays true, then that means 65% of our people will never get to the point where they're exceeding their deductible and
Right.
get into coinsurance, which is a pretty good number to land on.
Yeah, okay, all right, thanks.
Is there a motion to approve Health Partners to serve as the district's health insurance provider for the 26-27 school year?
And we're moving to self-funding, that's,
Yes.
so moved.
Thank you, Allison. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Alan. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you, Nate. That's a lot of work, and we appreciate it. All right, now Nate, could you please walk us through these job descriptions? And I think I'll take 2 through 6 as one motion. So you
Yeah.
could go through all of them, and then we'll.
Yep, I will be brief with these. First of all, the Transportation Program Assistant job description, we're making a switch in this position from a supervisory position to one that aligns with the program assistant. We think that the responsibilities and duties fit the program assistant criteria, generally speaking, better than they do fit the supervisor. So this is a new job description that Lynette and Todd at the bus garage worked on, and we're putting that in front of you. The other job descriptions are either new job descriptions or replacing ones that are quite dated. So we used to have a secretary job description that was all encompassing, but over the course of time, we have more specific or precise responsibilities for different types of secretaries. A secretary of the activities office might be different than the attendance secretary, might be different than the principal's secretary. Paraprofessionals sometimes are engaging in roles similar or different to those two, which is why these job descriptions are before you tonight.
So would there be anything specific that a board member would like to ask about?
I'll move that we take all of those together, move that we approve them.
Thank you, Ellen. Is there a second?
second.
Thank you, Lindsay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried, and now we have shared services contract with CISA 11, and I'll turn to you, Dave.
Yep. So that is page 227 in your packet, if you're following along. The recommendation for next year would be that we would be renewing each of the services that we had in this year, except for district-level consulting. So in years prior, we had purchased a specific number of days for district-level consulting to support us with our mentorship initiative or other initiatives. This year, when we looked forward, we didn't see a specific reason why we would need to do that, so we dropped that. If at some point between now and any time during the next school year, if we found a need for that consulting, we could reach out to CISA and they would give us that at the specific daily rate. The only drawback is, it's whatever staff would be available. So the thing we're missing is we would maybe be very specific on which staff would be supporting us, but given what our plan is for the year, we don't see that as a need. Otherwise, it's very similar to last year.
Especially consultation with that is
Same concept.
Okay.
Same concept. Yep. That was another thing where we did a specific daily rate piece, and the same idea. We could, if we found a specific need, we can hire that out, but we don't have to. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the CISA 11 shared services contract for the 2026-27 school year? Thank you, Ellen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Allison. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried. All right, as far as letter F, Dave and I create these agendas quite in advance. They have to be posted. But at this point, we are not as ready as we thought we would be early or in the month to look at the parking lot improvements. So I would like to have a motion to table letter F until a time when the administration is ready to bring it to the board. Is there a motion, please? Thank you, Lindsay. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Allison. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried. All right. Do we have any proposed items for future agendas? Then we are going to schedule the next meetings. The Policy Ad Hoc Committee will meet Monday, April 6th at 6 o'clock. Educational Program Committee will meet Monday, April 13th at 6. The Personnel Committee will meet Monday, April 13th at 7 or immediately following Educational Program. The next regular board meeting will be Monday, April 20th at 6 o'clock. The board reorganizational meeting will be Monday, April 27th at 6 o'clock. And there will be a school board retreat on Monday, June 22nd at 5 o'clock. All of those meetings are going to be here in the district office. And now, as you know, I have to read this, but we are going to adjourn into closed session. And we will do that in pursuant to Wisconsin statute, section 1985-1C, which permits convening into closed session for the purpose of considering the employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Specifically, we are going to discuss the preliminary notice of non-renewal for certified staff. And I need a motion. Somebody needs to move that. Thank you, Allison. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ellen. And I'll need a roll call. Allison?
Yes.
Bo?
Yes.
Lindsay? Mike?
Yes.
I'm saying yes. Ellen?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Education program committee will not get off quite as easily next month, is my understanding. But thank you for sticking it out with us anyway.